Welcome everyone to this edition of Meet America. I'm Annie Griffin, your host, and today we have with us a wonderful guest, Barbara Honegger. She's an investigative journalist, an amazing woman, and we're going to be talking about Steve Bannon and who is he and why is he such a dangerous, in my opinion, person to have so much power in our country. So welcome and thank you, Barbara, for what you've been able to reveal.
Thank you. I'm on camera.
You are.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing for people to know is that Steve Bannon is a very dangerous man, but of course he's a dangerous man because he is the chief advisor and political strategist in the West Wing of the White House with Oval Office walk-in privileges to an even more dangerous man, Donald Trump. But people, you've asked me to let you know what I've learned about Steve Bannon. The most important thing for people to know about Steve Bannon is why he is one of the most dangerous people in the world. And that is because he is obsessed with a theory of history that is cyclical, as opposed to, in our Western worldview, time is a line. It goes from past to future and it doesn't cycle back on itself. But Steve Bannon has bought into, very passionately, and I think obsessively, a cyclical view of history, and he believes that we are approaching the fourth segment of the current cycle of history in which a huge world war is, quote, inevitable, unquote, in his mind. And he has actually said publicly that the United States will be in a war in the South China Sea with China within a decade. So there's no question in my mind that the reason that we'll get to Trump in a bit, the reason that Steve Bannon believes that it's a good idea to make nice with Russia is because he believes, and Trump believes, that that we need to be allies with Russia in this, quote, inevitable, unquote, in their mind, coming war with China. So this is a very dangerous worldview. When I was in the Reagan Bush Sr. campaign, transition in White House, I actually did the research and pulled together what was called a international security alert, which I could provide to you. Maybe you could make a link to it on your webpage with the video. Can't do that now. Don't have the link right now, but I'll get it for you. But anyway, this international security alert, which I published in 1982. And sent 50,000 copies worldwide to every UN ambassador, to the heads of the nations of the world, proved that Ronald Reagan and the top members of his cabinet believed that Armageddon, a nuclear Armageddon with Russia, they believed, was inevitable. Now we have this opposite or parallel view of the Bannon-Trump camp in the Trump administration that a war, presumably they think nuclear, with China is inevitable within 10 years, according to Bannon. So this is a very, very, very dangerous worldview because it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other danger of Bannon, and I'll get here in a moment why Trump is even more dangerous than him, is that there's no question in my mind that he is a white supremacist ethnic nationalist, okay? Trump and Bannon, more explicitly Bannon, in his public statements and public appearances, including at conferences, has stated very explicitly that the United States needs to, quote, return, unquote, to be a white Christian nation, okay? Well, the problem with that, of course, is that what America is about is, we think, at least in the progressive part of politics in this country, that what America is about, our fundamental value, is expanding the inclusion of equal rights for all of our people. And they are diametrically opposed to this. They actually want to go back to what they call an originalist view of our Constitution, of constitutional interpretation by the Supreme Court, which would take us back to 1789 when the Constitution was passed. It was ratified. But the problem is a lot's happened since then. And they actually want to go back to before the Civil War in terms of legal jurisprudence and interpretation by the Supreme Court. They hate the 14th Amendment, which is our bedrock guarantee. It was the fruit of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of deaths in the Civil War. The 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection, equal rights for every American citizen. So these people are very dangerous. That's the gist of Steve Bannon. He believes that we are inevitably going to have to go to war with China, and we'd better make nice and allies with Russia while we can. I'm absolutely convinced that this is the real reason that Bannon and Trump make one of their fundamental campaign promises, and they apparently intend to carry them out, to return the industrial base of the United States to the United States. All this talk about bringing the corporations back to the United States, bringing jobs back to the United States, they're not the least bit interested in service sector jobs, which are predominantly female jobs. They're only interested in these industrial jobs, which are primarily male jobs, right? So why would you want to return the industrial base of the United States? To prepare for war. To prepare for war. They just assume that we're going to have to go to war with China in about a decade. And they're trying to lay the groundwork for this. They're extremely dangerous. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
All right, well, that brings me to a rather interesting point, which I'm going to just reiterate here. When I was 21, this was back.
Yeah, that was just a few years ago.
That was just a few years ago, yes. But that was, oh gosh, I guess it was in 1969. And I lived with a family, and he worked for Northrop.
Uh-huh.
And I remember him coming to us. We were just, he and his daughter, I was with his daughter, and I lived there. And he came to us one day with a little red book.
A red book?
A little red book, and it said the Red Dragon on it.
Uh-huh.
And he told us that China was going to be the next world power. Now this was back in '69, right? Mm-hmm. We were just little airhead teenagers. I don't know why he was telling us, but mm-hmm. It was like he was trying to tell someone that as a person who worked for a weapons manufacturer,
a defense contractor.
Yes, exactly. That this greatly concerned him, and it was something that should concern us. And I never forgot his sort of desperate kind of, trying to tell these two airhead teenagers that could care less. I could care less.
Well, you're no airhead, my dear.
Well, maybe
not now.
But I was then.
Yeah.
But it always stuck in my mind. Why is this man telling us this? So to me, as I've studied the conspiracy theories throughout, the last few years, I'm wondering if this has all been something that's been
planned for a long time.
Planned for a long time. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no question that China is definitely a rival of the United States. There's no question about that. I happen to agree with Trump and his administration that these, international trade deals have been terrible for the United States. There's no question about that. They've been to the benefit of China. There's no question about that. And something has to be done about it. It would be a good thing to balance the trade playing field with China. That would be very important. Because we don't want to give any nation, or in my opinion, we shouldn't give ourselves any advantage in the playing field of international trade and trade either. So I'm glad for that. But what really concerns me is this passionate, obsessive belief of Steve Bannon in this critical place where he has walk-in privileges to the Oval Office. And Trump just the other day cited an article in Breitbart News where Bannon had been the chief editor and CEO, as I recall his position, on some claim. So we know that We know that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, still monitors Fox News and monitors Breitbart News and takes whatever they say and puts it out on Twitter, and it becomes the position of the President of the United States, the official position sometimes of the President of the United States. So what happens when when the person who has his ear in the Oval Office anytime he wants, Steve Bannon, believes that war with China is inevitable and that we need to prepare for it now, and that's why we need to be allies with Russia?
Well, now, here is my question. Is there any statement from Steve Bannon himself that we can access right now where he talks about his fervent belief of, that a nuclear war is inevitable?
I have it with me, if you can stop it.
All right, so that's what
we'll
we're
put it
going
on
to
the
do.
screen.
That's what we're going to do right now, okay?
So can you stop? Well, interesting you should ask that question, because I happen to bring with me, expecting you might, this article from the New York Times only 2 days ago, Saturday, March 4th, 2017, page A11 in the hard copy paper here on the West Coast. It's entitled Trump's View of Military Might as Means and End. And these are the critical 3 paragraphs I wanted to read. Quote, every president has worked to retain military superiority over major adversaries, but Mr. Trump is unusually single-minded in his focus on preparing for a great power conflict, which the world has averted since World War II. Unquote. Now, that's the first of the 3 paragraphs I'm going to read. Why is that chilling? It's chilling because a great power conflict means only one thing. It has to mean either Russia or China. And as we know, he wants to be allies with Russia against China. Continuing, quote, this echoes the beliefs of Stephen K. Bannon, his senior advisor, whose nationalist ideology traditionally sees great power conflict as inevitable. Quote, we are going to war in the South China Sea, i.e. against China, in only 5 to 10 years, unquote, Bannon said in a March 2016 radio broadcast. Quote, there is no doubt about that, unquote. Continuing the article, when Mr. Trump, President of the United States, said this week that he would equip the Navy, the U.S. Navy, to, quote, win, unquote, a war, he likely sought only to demonstrate his faith in the U.S. military. But that comment has deepened the impression that President Trump may consider modern great power conflict to be winnable, an idea that has been put out of favor since the first years of the Cold War, in other words, right after World War II, when nuclear deterrence made it unthinkable, unquote. And it still is unthinkable, but not to Mr. Bannon and President Trump. That is chilling.
Well, that is chilling, and I'd like to say here that, yes, now they have bombs that make it winnable. And I learned this about 35 years ago when I was in a bar, and I happened to be sitting next to someone, and we struck up a conversation, as people do. And I asked him what he did for a living, and he said he was a spy. And so I said, oh, that's interesting. And then we went forward with the conversation. I don't know how it came up. But he said, well, have you heard of the Proton Bomb? And I said, no. And I said, what is that? And he said, a proton bomb is a bomb. Literally, the protons strike the skin of anything living, and it eats it, and then it becomes neutralized so that there is no radioactive material fallout afterwards. Well, I was shocked. I didn't believe him. But I happened to be going with someone at the time, my boyfriend, and his father was a very eminent nuclear scientist. And he actually sat on the Los Alamos board, and highly respected man. I won't mention his name here, but we were all having dinner and we were talking about nuclear weapons, etc., etc. And so I decided to throw out the proton bomb to see what his reaction would be. And I said, well, what about the proton bomb?
I'll bet there was a silence.
Well, he just looked stunned for a minute, and he looked at me and he said, how do you know about that?
Which is a confirmation.
Yeah, and I said, well, I learned it from this person. and the conversation was dropped. But I knew then that that had struck a chord with him,
Yeah.
right? So what this means, folks, is that you and I have nowhere to go. Meanwhile, Walmart has under practically all of its stores across America, you can type in YouTube search underground tunnels logo Walmart, and you will see all these underground tunnels. There's underground tunnels to house all the military, all the presidents, all the powerful people, but you and I as civilians, we have no idea where we go. And in World War II, at least they had bomb shelters. We don't have that now. So it's time for us to go to our city councils and say, well, what do we do in the event of a proton bomb?
And you're sure it was proton? He
It was
said, and not
proton.
neutron.
No, he said proton, because
Okay.
I knew about neutron, but I didn't
Yeah.
know about proton. So
Yeah.
this is something one can look up right now and find out.
There's
And,
actually some pretty credible evidence, which I'd have to go into in a different show, another show, that a weapon like what you described, the proton bomb, was used on 9/11.
that's right. You investigated
demonstration.
The thermite.
No,
No,
not the
wasn't.
thermite. Quite different from the thermite is in the dust. The military grade and sulfurated nanothermite is unquestionably in the dust of the World Trade Center. Explosions, explosive demolitions. But no, I'm talking about multiple witnesses who say that they were looking at people who were in the trade towers and they simply disappeared in front of them.
Yeah. Really?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
see, there it is.
Like a
There-
demonstration test. Remember, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not militarily necessary attacks that ended World War II in Japan. They were demonstration tests. And when you read the history, they were really demonstration tests of our new nuclear weapon, our atom and hydrogen bombs, as a demonstration, as a warning to the then Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So there is good reason to believe that there were modern day advanced weapons that were also in a demonstration test for the cognoscente in the national security communities of the entire world on 9/11.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to look just briefly now. Do you have some more links you want us to go to?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I do.
All right. Now
Just a couple.
Hold on. Okay.
Good show.
Okay.
All right. So on the screen here in a moment, if it isn't up already,
Yeah, there it is.
oh, good. You should be able to see a link to a public presentation that I made just this past week, a week ago today, actually. I made it on the 27th of February. And it's now March 6th now, something like that. March 6th, 2017. So on February 28th in Santa Cruz, in a public presentation that was sponsored by the Thrive.
February 27th.
February 27th of just past 2017. I gave a public presentation that was sponsored by the Thrive organization, Foster and Kimberly Gamble's organization, for the YouTube Thrive that has now more than 75 million views, if you can imagine. Wow. Anyway, I gave this public presentation, and everyone really needs to watch it. I go into much of what we've said here today, but a lot more on the true danger of Donald Trump and the secret plan that's in the works. And how I know from the inside of the Reagan-Bush White House and Department of Justice. And the link to Trump is a man by the name of Ed Meese, who I call the spider in the middle of the web. Ed Meese was the senior counselor and advisor, basically the Bannon of the Ronald Reagan presidency in the first term, Reagan's first term, and then he became Attorney General, as many people will remember, in Reagan's second term. And the same man, Ed Meese, is a major advisor. He was on the transition team for Donald Trump, and he is basically the major legal advisor to Donald Trump. And Mises' two major organizations, the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society, personally chose the list of 21 potential court nominees that Trump has pledged publicly he will only choose his judge nominees from, and Judge Gorsuch, who is his current nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States. Confirmation hearings haven't happened yet, is from that list of 21. And in that presentation at that link, it's on YouTube, for my talk in Santa Cruz a week ago today, I go into how I know, from having been in the Reagan White House and Justice Department under Ed Meese, what their secret plan is to literally devastate all equal rights in the United States. You need to see this.
Yeah.
And thank you for this interview.
Thank you for, putting your neck out literally on the chopping block.
Well, I hope not.
Well, really, it is that. It is that. I mean, they can get rid of us so easily, and
well, they don't.
No one basically knows what to do anymore. But
well, we do.
But I thank you anyway, and that's what we're here for.
That's right.
The people. Like I heard a woman the other day say, it's up to us now. We've all got to do something because they're poisoning us with our air, our water, our pollution, everything.
Right.
And now, of course, this inevitable, getting us used to inevitable
the idea
war.
of inevitable great power war, just like World War II. These people are planning for World War III. And there are two factions in our federal government and military intelligence, national security complex. There are those who say we should go to war with Russia, and there are those who say we should go to war with China. Take your pick. They're both dangerous.
And we also know that they are prepared. They have underground cities, underground tunnels, and we do not. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Now, what is the next thing? Do you
No, that's
have another link?
It's okay.
No. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Barbara.
We're trying to sell my mom's house, and I'm meeting with the...
And now I'm going to prove to you about the underground tunnels, because there's nothing like proof of the pudding in order for Americans to start going, oh my God, maybe Annie's onto something. Maybe Barbara's onto something. Folks, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect ourselves from these warmongers, these people that believe nuclear war, proton war is inevitable, because they are safely going to be hidden in these underground tunnels, which I can tell you are going to collapse. So they're not even going to be safe. The earth is going to squish them like a bunch of caught little bugs in a tube. That's what's going to happen. They don't know that yet, but I do. I just know intuitively they're not going to get away with it. And the pressures that they're creating on the earth is going to crush those tunnels as much as they're crushing us. So let's get informed here, and I'm going to show you the next segment. Underground tunnels, Walmart.
News with your host, Adam Baker. Today on Logical News, we're going to be speaking about Walmart. Walmart. A lot of you have heard the rumors about Walmart and wondering why they closed down, why they laid off people with an hour's notice, 500 people at a time in various cities across the country. And I've just kept digging into this, and I've spent weeks at this point digging into this situation. I will have a full-blown report on this, a special report on the Walmarts and why the booms are going on. I'm going to cover a little bit of it with you here, just so you have an idea of what's going to be coming and the detailed report that I will be putting out. As you can see here on the front of this drill, this is the Walmart logo. You're familiar with the Walmart logo, I'm sure, right? Walmart logo that looks like this. Okay. It is no coincidence that the markings on the front of this drill that they chose to put on there match the Walmart exactly. And the reason is because they are tunneling under all of the Walmarts. Well, I say all. Probably not all. Okay, it's a large number, and it's happening all over the United States. And there's a preponderance of evidence that I've been able to find. It all ties in back, and I'm going to show this in the special report, that it all ties in back all the way back into, actually probably into the 60s, but really started going in the 70s. Y'all guys have all seen this map before. It's a map that got leaked out onto the internet, and nobody knows where it really came from exactly, showing a tunnel network that supposedly exists coming in and out of Denver. And then there's a full-blown version of this map as well that shows more. And everybody's seen this map, but nobody has ever seen this part of the map. These other parts. I tracked down the original map, not just the cutout. Okay. Now the interesting things that you'll see about this full-blown version here. Let me pull this down. Everybody assumed that this map was from the 1990s because it had a 90 on it here. It's been said many times from the 90s. It's not from the 90s. This map was created in 1973. As you can see in the upper right hand corner here, it says 1973. It also says maybe even the 50s they started them. We all know that all major cities around the world have tunnels underneath them. Maybe they even exist in your city, or even they exist and you don't know it. But they've gotten very elaborate with these tunnel systems now. And they have tunneled and had 45 years to tunnel all over the United States. And they're connecting them with all of the Walmarts. And I know that sounds crazy. It might sound like they couldn't do it, but they're doing it. Myself, I'm an ear witness here near Charleston, South Carolina, and I hear almost on a daily basis, I hear a boom that's coming from underground, and it's an ongoing thing. I've probably in the last 2 weeks probably heard 20 of them, something like that. One that was really loud, shook the house, shook the windows, the sliding glass doors, everything. Now you're looking at this logo here. Well, that's actually not a logo, but we know what it is when you can see that it actually matches to this. It also matches to this, and it also matches to the Jewish star. And it is a big thing, just like George Bush said back in the day, it's a big idea. Tend to do with these tunnel systems, well, they're going to be multi-purpose, of course. You know, they've got cities under there, but the biggest thing is you know, they were getting exposed about having FEMA camps above ground, in which they do have quite a few camps above ground where they can hold a lot of people. But how many you reckon they could hold underground? Or how many soldiers do you think they could have staged underground to come out of the ground around these Walmarts like ants? How many United Nations soldiers do you think they could have staged underground in these tunnel systems? This is Walmart right here. This is all the Walmart locations across the United States. The boom map, which I've shown in a previous video, matches this map exactly, and I'll be showing that again with a lot of additional information way past what I'm showing you here today. This is just a quick group of information so that you have something to start realizing the fact that this might be possible. And it's not only possible, it's probable. And it's not only probable, I feel confident that this is the case. Now, every one of these Walmarts do not have a tunnel system under, I'm sure. But I can tell you that there are a lot